The South African Post Office is heading to court. It wants to enforce a government monopoly which would prevent private courier companies from delivering goods of under 1 kilogram. Joining us to discuss this story is Terence Corrigan, project manager at the Institute of Race Relations. Terence, what is the background to this story and what would be some of the ramifications for the private courier industry?
Look, in terms of the legislation under which it operates, it has a kind of statutory monopoly on these small weight items, anything up to 1 kilogram. Um, I think the phrase is a registered postal service. Now, courier companies are courier companies. They are defined somewhat differently. But because of the unreliability of the post office, the literal problem of getting your parcel from A to B within a reasonable time, the post office has hemorrhaged that sort of business very, very badly. There's other things. The breakdown of direct mail, or things moving onto electronic format. But you have an institution which is now essentially bankrupt, which has financial problems from which it seems unable to recover. And essentially what it's trying to do is force that business into its back into its stores, and that money back onto its bottom line.
Enjoying this analysis? Click here to sign up for our 30-day free trial for more content from the CIA.
Terence, what would be the impact here for consumers and also for firms that are operating as private couriers?
Probably essentially wipe out most of the courier industry, and this is a big industry. I mean, we're talking billions and billions of rands going through it. I think that for people who actually make use of these services, they would then have a choice. Do you try and work around it, trying to digitize more than you can already, although that's not always going to be possible, or do you trust to the post office? Now, my own experience, and I think this is borne out by a great deal of certainly anecdotal evidence, and I think I think the post office would be hard pressed to dispute this, is that many of these small weight items, things like medicines, credit cards, passports, it's not just that they're time sensitive, which they may frequently be. Think of medicines, but also that they could have there could be severe security issues. Now, another problem is pilfering. Things can, in a sense, disappear into the ether, even when something is tracked. And generally speaking, when I am forced to use the post office, I do have my items tracked. They can be picked up in one venue, and you can literally sit and wait for 3 or 4 months. Now, you're not sure whether that has vanished in the meantime. There have been some disturbing investigative reports about fraud rings going after credit cards and things like that within the post office. And I think you would find that that a lot of e-commerce would simply stop functioning, or would take a massive knock, because you would be almost certain of getting your items late, and you would probably and you would run a risk of not getting them at all.
So, Terence, it seems to me that what the post office is trying to effect is protection via regulation rather than improving its service through competition. What role do you see for the post office in South Africa, if at all? Is this still an institution that is fit for purpose?
I think that the post office we have is clearly not fit for purpose, but I think that one has to differentiate that from a somewhat different point. Do we need the post office, or do we need a post office? And I would say yes. I've spoken to a lot of people within the sort of logistics industry, people who distribute, and the basic message is that if you are living and distributing within Johannesburg, any number of private operators can do it quicker and cheaper than the post office. The problem comes when you're trying to send things, particularly sort of large volumes, to outlying areas. And this can be fairly sizable towns, where it just becomes unviable to send to send a parcel at any kind of affordable rate, to a small outlying community, whereas the post office has that sort of network and that internal subsidy. I mean, that's what it's designed for. And that is why I think that these institutions still have that core role. I think one of the problems, though, is that the post office in South Africa, the ability to fulfill that has declined to such an extent, and it has lost confidence to such a degree that it's tried to paper over those cracks by looking at alternatives. So you have your car license done, or you collect your social grants. Now that's well and good, um, but those are supplementary services. If you are still going to handle these massive volumes of mail, and you are talking about, I think it's 2 million items moved through the post office every day, and this is with all of its problems. Now they may move slowly, and it takes 6 months to get there, but the point is that it's very difficult to see anything else being able to pick that up on a national scale. So at some point, one has to address that inefficiency, or I think we just have a structural break within our communication system.
Terence, you mentioned diversification of services, and one of the areas in which post offices abroad have been able to compete is in financial services. And I know when Mark Barnes left the post office when he was CEO, one of the issues that was a sticking point was the hiving off of Postbank. What are your thoughts on that as an example of the post office and its ability to move with the times?
The sort of post office as a financial institution has quite a long pedigree. You go back and read Cry the Beloved Country. There's a reference to the priest post office book, his post office savings book. This was something that was done for generations by South Africans, and because of its reach, it was a kind of budget banking service for a lot of people. The problem comes in that in terms of legislation, a bank can't be owned by an essentially dysfunctional and bankrupt institution. So even if one decided to retain it, and I do have sympathy for Mark Barnes's position, the post office just, I don't think, was in a position to do so. I don't think could legally be allowed to do so. The problem, of course, that we get to is, well, how did it get to this point? Like so many of our state-owned enterprises, there's a big story behind that.
Terence, what in your view were the factors that led to the post office finding itself in this current state?
Look, I think that it's been a long time coming. I remember growing up in the 1980s, there were issues with letters not arriving, but I think that essentially it just went into the skids, sometime in the early 2000s. I think that that it failed to adapt to the growth and the possibilities of e-commerce. It failed to discipline its workforce, even if it was a small portion. The constant pilfering and things like that led to companies like Amazon no longer being willing to work with it, and then subsequently, even local e-commerce outfits don't give you the option of using the post office anymore. A decade ago, they did. Once you've sort of reached, there were also issues with staffing, tensions between people who were permanent employees and those who were brought on contracted terms, consistent labor disputes. But ultimately, I think every one of these just twisted and destroyed its ability to render its service a little bit more, until that service is just not, people are just not willing to risk it and would rather go for a more expensive option. I think I have no easy answers to this, but I think it's going to be a long and arduous path of trying to claw back some of that confidence. And frankly, I think that this attempt now to force people back is more likely to see people exit that altogether. Rather than relying on the post office to deliver your one book from a local e-commerce vendor, you get a little consortium of your friends together, so you can order, all of you can order a book, and you get 2 kilograms, and you can have that sent to one person. That's the kind of thing people will start to do. But in doing that, having to jump through these hoops, you cripple South Africa's competitiveness, its ability to operate as a modern economy even more. And like so many of our SOEs, I think that that a choice has to make. You know, do you want to is this where you want to go, or do you want to start making hard, uncomfortable decisions?
Thanks very much, Terence. Let's hand over to you, our viewers. When was the last time that you used the post office, and what was your experience of the service? My name is David Ansara. This is the Center for Risk Analysis. If you enjoyed this commentary, please consider subscribing to the CRA as a client. There's a link in the 30-day free trial below. Until next time, take care.